Okay, here we go. So this is episode number 5. We're going to go back to the very start of the specification, which is the multi-store model of memory. I have created some of these questions, so I've just gone onto a Word document and just made up these questions. So all of these views are my own in terms of what I would include in the question. And I will break down the questions how I would do it, and then if you want to go back using any resource, whether it's a textbook, booklet, or your own notes, and then compare against what you would include. Right, so here goes. So let's have a look at the question. So here we are. So just move that, there we go. So it says, according to the multi-store model of memory, what has psychological research shown about memory in the short term? So in terms of the breakdown of the question, this is a 6-mark question, so I've put this up the top here, just so it's, as I said, just a question that I've kind of made up. So there's the 6. So we're dealing with the multi-store model of memory. Now with this, obviously, it's going to be sometimes difficult to distinguish between the multi-store and the working memory model. But obviously this one, again, what you might want to do at this point is to pause the video and have a think to yourself which of these models it is. So is it the one with the sensory short-term, long-term as the 3 boxes, or is it the one with the central executive as the main component? So hopefully if you pause that video, you've now had a think and you now know that the model that we're dealing with is the one with the 3 boxes. So we have our sensory register, short-term and long-term memory. But the question is actually saying, what has psychological research shown? Okay, so this is a really, really important key word over there, and then it says about memory in the short term. So we are dealing with just the short term, and remember this word over here, research, is crucial, because this can be theory or study. So a lot of people may look at this and think straight away, right, I need to jump straight into all the studies. I know to know exactly all those little mini studies which a lot of people talk about. But for this particular question, what you can do is focus mainly on the actual what the research has shown. So what you don't want to do for this particular question is describe all of the multi-store model. This is in my opinion, as I said, this is just a question I've made up. So multi-store model of memory, you don't want to start going, there's an environmental stimuli, this goes into the sensory register, this can be iconic or echoic, etc., etc. What you want to do is get right into the bit here where it says, what has the psychological research shown? Okay, so think about the different elements of short term within the sensory, short-term and long-term memory. Okay, so what I would do now at this moment is pause the video and have a think. Can you remember, what is the capacity of the short term? Now what I've done there is fallen straight into the trap where, or you may fall into the trap, should I say, where I've thought, right, sensory, short-term, long-term, they're all to do with the multi-store model, so right, let's go straight into it. But as I said before, you need to remember that we're only dealing with the short-term. So yeah, you could plan around the question thinking, yeah, long-term's this, short-term's this, but I would jump straight in actually, on retrospect, I would go straight into short-term so you don't get confused. Okay, so if you pause the video, give this question a go, and then I will go through what I would do for this question that I've constructed. Okay, so hopefully you've had a go there. Now, the first focus for this question, what I'm personally going to do, is I'm going to focus around the idea of, I am going to mention all three. The three big hitters here, as I said, are capacity, coding, and duration. Okay, so I'm going to start with capacity just because it's what I would do in the exam. I don't know why this pen isn't thicker. That's a bit better. So yeah, so I'm thinking back to what is the capacity of the short term. Now hopefully you've put in there, and what I would do is use the wording of the question. So what I've put here for my question is, what has psychological research shown about memory in the short term? So start with that phrase. Psychological research has shown that the capacity of the short term, and you go on. Okay, so the capacity of the short term can hold. So you want to be saying, it argues that the amount of information that can be held is 7 plus or minus 2, which is essentially, as we always say, 5 to 9 items. Okay, so you drop it in there as well a little bit, like I know what capacity means. Quickly go to that. Now, at this point, it does say psychological research, so yeah, you could make reference to a study. You could talk about Miller at this moment with his 7 plus or minus 2. But because remember the word research means theory and or study, you don't have to do that. Okay, I might have just put brackets Miller. You could say this was shown in Miller's study where he used the digit span technique, so that he uses, so you know you've shown a little bit more knowledge off. But what you definitely don't do is say how it's been shown. Right, so you don't go, oh, they got participants to go in front of a screen and then they remembered a number, because that's how they did it. This is all about what it's shown. Okay, so moving on. So you could say something like, with regards to, is quite a nice filler, or in terms of, with regards to duration. So this is another one of our key bits here. So with regards to duration, they found that the short term tends to last for 18 to 30 seconds. You could, again, because it's saying according to the multi-store model of memory, and all these little mini studies, all they're doing is providing support for it, you could make reference to Peterson and Peterson briefly. 18 to 30 seconds, you could, I mean, you don't want to go off too much on a tangent, you could say this can be increased using maintenance rehearsal, just to again show the examiner you know it a bit more there. And if you deem necessary, again it's that depth versus breadth, you could then finally talk about coding, and obviously that there is coding acoustically. Okay, so that is the kind of information that you need for that type of question. What you might want to do as well, just like I have created this question myself and put it into a Word document, what you could do is do exactly the same question, but then just change the word at the end, short term. You could change that to long term. You could change the word shown to how, so what is psychological, or how has psychological research been conducted, and that will be a lot more to do with the procedures of how they actually did it, rather than what it has shown. So that's the first question. As I said, 6 marks, could be maybe less, but as I said, this question that I've created, I've done it as a 6 marker for the purpose of the clip. Now, if you're not sure of this section, do go back to any resource that you want to use, but just remember key exam tips from that question. Obviously breaking down the question as always, what has psychological research shown? So psychological research, that word research meaning theory and or study, and then the word shown is key because shown suggests what are the findings or what has been found because of that research. So what we'll do now, just go on to the last question. There's only two in this. This I've done, and I've just created this question myself, and it's an 8-mark question. And here it is. So this is the 8-mark question that I've created. Obviously, this could be a 16-mark question as well. Could have a scenario as an 8. I've just made up this one myself and put this down as an 8. And as I said, this is just my views on what I would do for this question. So the first thing, again, just like before, you might, well, I would 100% now pause this video, break down the question yourself, and see what what you can remember of this. If this is an area of concern or you're not too sure what to do here, then do revisit the area. Having watched this video, maybe leave it a few days and see what you can remember then. But as I said, pause the video and then I'll break down the question. Okay, so in terms of the breakdown, so we're dealing with an 8-marker. The command word is discuss. The 8 marks will be split 3 and 5, in my opinion. We are dealing with obviously memory and the multi-store again. So discuss, you're thinking, as we said before, AO1, AO3, multi-store model. Now, personally, I don't think you should draw this. I mean, you could draw it as a little plan. Some people argue that yeah, you could do it maybe if you're running out of time and just label things, but it's much better in my opinion to actually write things in full. So what you're going to do now, again, pause the video, have a go at this question. Do think to yourself, you might want to on the side think, oh, do I remember any strengths and weaknesses? Do I know the AO1 but not the AO3? If that's the case, then obviously, put a big attention onto AO3 with this. Always ensure you've got at least a strength and a weakness to mind. Okay, so here we go then. So I'm going to go to the question. I'm just going to bullet point this in terms of content. What I am going to be doing in the near future is I will be creating a random essay that I've created myself, and what I'm going to do is write it in full, in time conditions, or just in full how I would answer the question. Just so you can see just a variety of language and how you could go about this question. Okay, so let's go back to the question. Here it is. So first thing I'm going to get across, I'm going to drop, normally in a 16 mark you might include more of this. I would always start, in my opinion, just really briefly, just saying that this is, well, it is, we know it's a structural model. You could say info flows in a linear way, and there are 3 separate unitary stores. Okay, so just a quick line on that, nothing major. So what you want to do here, because it's only 3 marks, remember, for the AO1, is get across your points really. So say you're doing a 16 marker, you might want to give more information, a little bit more information about each store. But for this one, you are basically summarizing the model, but in a snapshot for 3 marks, okay? So that's obviously AO1 at the top as well. So further AO1, what you want to be always mentioning is naming the box, or the area of memory. You might want to drop in the idea that memories come in via a stimuli, can be iconic and echoic. If you pay attention, that goes to the short term, and what it's all about here is getting straight to the point and getting your keywords in. So you could talk there about maintenance rehearsal briefly. If you don't pay attention, it's going to decay. Obviously mention the long term, elaborative and prolonged. So again, but in a 16 marker, at this point with the short term, you might want to say, oh, it tends to last 18 to 30 seconds. You know, this can be increased by maintenance. So you're just cutting out fine details and getting more to the point. For the 3 marks, you could just talk about elaborative rehearsal, so giving it understanding and meaning, and that will get it into the long-term memory. Okay. Okay, so now the AO1's done. Obviously AO3 evaluation can cause a few problems here. So what we want to do is think of all the potential AO3s that you could apply to this. There are numerous things. I'm going to try and just go for some of the ones that I would personally do. So in terms of strength, I mean, you could use researcher support. You could use some of those little studies that we talked about earlier. You could do that. You could go down the route of anything really in terms of support. But what I will say is, if I go to, hold on a second, let's just go there. So I'm going to just put here. Now I'm going to go for this just because, and I know you can use this. You can use this as research to contradict, because obviously some people argue that this multi-store model is too simplistic, and the long-term split further, and we know that there's episodic and semantic and all this kind of stuff. But what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to use the case study of Clive Waring. And a lot of people might see that and go, but I thought he only contradicts. Well, actually, he does support, and he supports the idea, and this links nicely into what you've written in the AO1, supports the idea that information flows in a linear way, because he obviously has amnesia and he can't generate new memories, so he can remember the odd thing, but he can't transfer. So the key thing to get across, can't transfer short term to long term. The key with this one as well, you must get in then though, this therefore supports the multi-store model of memory because, and it is because it suggests that information flows in a linear way. Now what you could do there as your other AO3 to counter this, you could go down the route and say, you know, however, some people argue that Clive Waring doesn't support it because it's suggesting that there's more types of long-term. You could go down the route of saying, however, Clive Waring is just one singular study. Can we apply this to everything? But what you also could do, which may be easier if you forget, is you could say this model is described as too simplistic, and there are alternative models and then reference the working memory model. Okay, so you could say that, obviously remembering to finish with the phrase, therefore the multi-store model of memory may not be the only explanation of memory. So that concludes my views on this as a question that I've just made up there. Obviously, you can do your own versions of these. Check across with any booklet, any support text that you may use, any work that you've done on this. And as I said, all these views are my own on that. Okay, there is no harm as well in any of these sections that you can't do what I'm doing here and make up your own scenario questions maybe, or your own 8 markers or your own 16 markers, because the more questions that you kind of make up, maybe you could swap them with a peer or something, the more you're exposing yourself to a variety of questions. Okay, there we are. So that concludes this video. Any questions, as always, let me know, and I will see you next time.